Turns out Jeffrey Epstein met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu as early as 1989. And that's not according to me, Cenk. That's according to reporting from the New York Times that went unnoticed, which I'm about to get to in just a minute. And that is relevant today because Netanyahu has repeatedly attacked his political opponent, Ehud Barak, for his association with Epstein, which was long-running and wide-ranging, certainly more so than we know about Netanyahu. But before we get to all those details, Cenk, your thoughts?
Yeah, so Anna's going to show you a couple of clear instances where Netanyahu and Epstein are working together. So that's very revealing. Then I want to give you the broader context of how much Epstein worked with Israel, because it is overwhelming. All right, Anna.
Now, I don't know how our producer, Taylor Ellis, found this article. It was published by the New York Times in December of last year, December 16th to be specific. It's titled, "Screams, Schemes, Ruthless Cons, the Untold Story of How Jeffrey Epstein Got Rich."
You did a Freudian slip there. You said screams, which I'm sure existed, but it was scams.
Apologies, scams, not screams. I think I said screams because I'm screaming inside every day these days. But okay, so the report chronicles Epstein's rise to power, and it also downplayed Epstein's, ties and relationship with our own government, foreign governments, and intelligence services, because of course, it couldn't be true that Epstein had any ties to intelligence services. But nonetheless, in that very same report, we learned that as early as 1989, Epstein was meeting with foreign government officials, and one of them happened to be Benjamin Netanyahu. So in 1989, Netanyahu was a member of the Israeli Knesset. He was not prime minister yet, and he, as a member of the Likud party, he's always been a member of the Likud party. And as the Times reported in December of last year, Epstein began donating thousands to politicians and developing relationships with them. In 1989, Epstein accompanied Wayne Owens, a Democratic congressman from Utah, on a trip to the Middle East to explore ways to promote business ties between Israel and its neighbors. Now, Epstein apparently struck the participants of this meeting as out of his depth and bored. Dan Gordon, a screenwriter who was part of the entourage, says he warned Owens that Epstein was showing disrespect by his slovenly attire in meetings with Israel's Benjamin Netanyahu and Shimon Peres and Saudi Arabia's crown prince at the time, the types of connections that Epstein would cultivate in the years ahead. One of Owens's aides, the Times writes, Michael Yeager, recalled Epstein boasting about his Indiana Jones-like pursuit of hidden assets and his close ties to Leslie Wexner. So look, that is the only mention of Benjamin Netanyahu in this New York Times piece. Taylor Ellis reached out to the Times to get a little more, elaboration, answer a few questions, but we have not heard back. Now, the report's authors have written at length about Jeffrey Epstein per our own research, but have yet to report in more detail on Epstein's meetings with Netanyahu. So I wanna learn more about what was said in that meeting. What did they talk about? None of that detail is in the New York Times piece. Now, later we learned that Epstein connected Netanyahu to JP Morgan Chase executives in 2011. So the Daily Beast actually reported the following in 2023. In March 2011, one JP Morgan employee wrote to JP Morgan executive Jess Staley and another high-level executive, quote, "Against all odds, we have been granted a meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu." Staley forwarded the message to Epstein and wrote, "Thanks," to which the convicted sex offender replied, "Surprise, surprise." Now, I wanna be very clear, we have not seen any evidence that Netanyahu engaged in any lascivious or shady sexual behavior or activity. The whole point of this is that Epstein did meet with Netanyahu, even though Netanyahu denies it. And what we do know for certain is that Epstein does have close ties with former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak. Earlier this month, Netanyahu said the following I can't believe he posted this, but anyway, Jeffrey Epstein's unusual close relationship with Ehud Barak doesn't suggest Epstein worked for Israel. It proves the opposite. Barak's personal it's hilarious. Barak's personal fixation led him to engage in activities publicly and behind the scenes to undermine the government of Israel, including fueling mass protest movements, fomenting unrest, and feeding false media narratives, which is complete nonsense. One of the things that Epstein did on behalf of Israel is help them procure cyber weapons. Why would he do that if he's not working for Israel? Now, according to the New York Times, Netanyahu has more of a history with, according to that Times piece, it feels like Epstein has more of a history with Epstein than he's letting on. But one other thing I want to mention, Cenk, recently we shared reporting having to do with the DOJ's recent release of Epstein files and emails. And in those emails and files, we learned that the Israeli government, beginning in 2016, began installing surveillance and security systems in Epstein's Manhattan apartment. This began in 2016. They did so under the guise of, Ehud Barak visits often, so we want to secure the building. Netanyahu was the prime minister of Israel at the time.
Oh. That's weird. It seems like he knew Epstein then. I
mean, he certainly knew that Ehud Barak was constantly visiting Epstein's Manhattan apartment, which was being heavily surveilled by the Israelis at the time.
Yeah. So, Anna mentioned earlier, nobody's charging that Netanyahu had anything to do with the sex. Of course, because he knew there was video cameras everywhere. Mm-hmm. So why, if you're the one setting it up, you're not going to fall into the trap, presumably. So. Now, Netanyahu and JP Morgan had, as Anna described to you, meet because Epstein set it up. Okay, not only does that prove that Netanyahu obviously did know who Epstein was, in fact, they were stunned that Epstein at any moment he wanted could get the Israeli prime minister to show up to a business meeting, and he did, right? So now you go to the former prime minister, Ehud Barak, he arranged a meeting with him and the French president and the head of the Rothschild Bank. Epstein seems pretty powerful, right? To be able to do this. And then the former prime minister again, Ehud Barak, with Vladimir Putin. He could get a meeting with Vladimir Putin? I mean, only the most powerful men on earth could get a meeting with Vladimir Putin or the French president or the guy who set up the Oslo Accords or the Norwegian prime minister, etc. And every single time it is to help the Israelis. Things that make you go, oh. Now, since we're talking about the 1980s in the story, there's one other thing that every once in a while there's something that is super revealing, and it drives me crazy that everyone ignores it because it settles an issue, and then everyone pretends that the issue is not settled. So, Dropsite News already got leaked emails that show that Epstein was the guy who made a deal with the CIA to launder the planes they were using to bring in drugs to the country in the middle of Iran-Contra. You remember that story, right? And they say Israeli intelligence was also involved in that operation, and we don't know what Israeli intelligence did other than maybe they laundered the planes. Oh, who laundered the planes? Oh, Jeffrey Epstein. Because he traded them out for, he bought them on behalf of Leslie Wexner to use them for Victoria's Secrets and other products, and that's how you launder a plane. Oh, that plane, it didn't have drugs on it. That was Victoria's Secret's planes, right? So even if you say, hey, you know what, the part where he's Israeli intelligence in that particular story is not perfectly proven, that's true, okay? And we don't know exactly what Israeli intelligence there did definitively. But do we know that our intelligence, CIA, is aware of Jeffrey Epstein since the 1980s? Definitively, yes. There is no question at all. The CIA has been aware of Jeffrey Epstein.
Absolutely.
Since the 1980s. Benjamin Netanyahu has been aware of Jeffrey Epstein since the 1980s. And they have been doing these international deals throughout, including buying cyber weapons for, you'll never guess it, how did you know it was for Israel? But what's interesting, Anna, last thing is, New York Times does this story, and it has good details in it, good facts in it, right? Yeah. But somehow they can never connect the dots.
I know, that stood out to me as well, right? And it seems like despite increasing evidence tying Jeffrey Epstein to the Israeli government dating back decades, you keep seeing reports from people who deny it, right? They're like, well, now that we have all these files, we're done. The proof is in the pudding. Epstein had no ties to Israel whatsoever. Now look, let me.
It's hilarious.
It's amazing. Now look, guys, I know it's partly like a semantic thing, but it does matter. It matters to be precise. So just yesterday, I was on a forum for Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft. Murtaza Hussein, who is a fantastic reporter for DropSite, was part of it. And look, he has been poring over these files and doing incredible reporting on it, so I trust him more than my own thoughts, right? And he doesn't actually think that Epstein was, part of the Israeli government. He was more a money launderer who was a hardcore Zionist who wanted to do work on behalf of Israel. So a lot of the work he did do was on behalf of Israel. But make no mistake, he was wheeling and dealing and making all sorts of weird international deals as like some rando, right? Like, so how did he find himself in that powerful position? There's still a lot of missing pieces to this story.
So look, I struggle with that all the time, and I understand what he's saying, and he has an excellent case to make. And it could be that Epstein and all of his friends naturally just wanted to help Israel. That's why every transaction was to help Israel. That's actually slightly worse, because then it's not the Israelis, it's people that love Israel that live here. So that's really bad, and I don't want it to be that.
That definitely exists here,
right? So I'm worried about that. But the other reason why I'm not positive that he's right, I understand again what he's saying, because you could try to help Israel in every way, and there's a lot of folks who just love Israel,
and he was a supremacist. I mean, if you read the emails, the way he refers to non-Jewish people constantly, calling them, goy, goyim, this and that, and his
how
friends,
dare you say it?
I know, but by the way,
he's allowed to say it, but you're not.
If you are a goy, you're not allowed to refer to yourself as that. Okay, that's
kind of like the
wrong.
reverse.
That's very bad.
It's kind of like the reverse of the N-word. Like black folks are allowed to say it, but non-blacks aren't allowed to say it. But in this case, if you're a G word, you're not allowed to say the G word.
Please don't say G word. Please don't do that.
Okay, but if you're a weirdo, this doesn't apply to all Jews at all. It doesn't even apply to the overwhelming majority of Jews at all, right? But these sick guys that were doing this, they use it left and right, and nobody has any issues with it.
My best friend is Jewish. I've never heard her use that word once.
Right.
Never.
Yeah.
Okay, she's been my best friend since I was 16. Not once.
I want to go back to the point Murtaza was making. So it's possible that the entire operation wasn't run by Israel, but the guy running it wanted to help Israel, right? So the operation helped Israel, even though Israel didn't necessarily sign on to it. And a good piece of evidence for that, by the way, is that the Israelis put in the surveillance cameras way later, right? As Anna told you, like 2016, right? So, and there's also the issue of, like the Rothschilds. No, don't get it twisted. He starts making a deal with the Rothschilds in 2013. So way after everything started, right? Okay, now having said that, there's cameras and they're recording the super rich and powerful. That's a classic honeypot operation. And honeypot operations are intelligence. Like, so, okay. But so you want me to think that a honeypot operation that our intelligence is perfectly aware of is not an intelligence operation? That's weird. So we don't know everything yet, but the things we do know is, yes, Epstein and all of his friends and allies were obsessed with helping Epstein. Yes, Epstein ran a terrible pedophile ring and did a lot of other illicit things. And yes, whatever ammo he had, he used on behalf of Israel, whether they had signed up for it or not. And yes, it's a honeypot operation. And yes, the CIA definitely knew about Epstein.
Yeah.
So, but apparently we can't connect all the dots yet, okay? So I've connected enough of them to know which country benefited from Epstein. That one's not unclear.
I agree, yeah.
Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.